here for the 7th episode of our Fast 8 series. We're talking about weight and health optimization, and I'm glad that you're with us for tonight's program. I'm in a little bit different venue, and so far all the technology seems to be working well, so we're thankful for that. We're going to be diving into the updated handout. So if you don't have the updated handout, as always, you can get that simply by going to www.timelesshealinginsights.org/fast8. That's FAST, then the number 8. If you go there, you'll be able to download the current handout, and we are going to be looking at the material for week 7. I've also got an exciting interview lined up that we'll be having in just a few minutes. But first, I want to give you a little bit of overview for where we are headed this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share a screen here. And want to go ahead and I'm going to ask my tech fellow, Ronnie, my screen sharing is disabled right now. If you could help me out with that, that would make things easier on my end. So once Ronnie's able to help me out with that, we will go ahead and actually project the handout for you. So he's on top of things, and I am just navigating over to the Fast 8 program handout. So the current version, and realize if you're watching this after the live showing, so this is being shown live March 18th. If you're watching it after March 18th, the current version you download may be a different version of the handout. We've been basically doing upgrades on that handout pretty much on a weekly basis. So this material should not change much, however. So what you're looking at right now is week 7, which officially starts tomorrow if you're watching this in real time. And you'll see what the goals are. The goal is if you were ambitious and you actually took the challenge and started on a Daniel fast or a modified Daniel fast last week, and you really want to go the 10 days of the Daniel fast at a minimum, then you would continue for the first 3 days of next week. But what we're going to talk about tonight is consider expanding the Daniel fast, or expanding whatever you've been doing to include an elimination diet or a modified elimination diet. And we're going to be talking about that in particular tonight. We've also included some special things, some special materials in this week's handout as a result of your requests. We had some questions about ACE inhibitors, magnesium, calcium. If those sound like strange terms, then we will be getting to those terms a little bit later, and I'll share with you what's in the handout and why that's important. But I'm going to step away from the handout just so you know where we're headed, and we're going to go to an interview this evening. So let me put things in perspective for you. For those of you who are just joining us, or maybe just jumped on, or maybe you're joining with someone, this is a very different approach to weight loss. We're not giving long lists that people have to do. We're not saying you're cheating if you don't do the recommended thing. We're not saying you're failing if you're not following certain recommendations. Every participant is choosing what goals they are going to implement, what kind of focus they want to set. And we've been rolling out different things each week, some different fasting strategies that individuals could try. Some of you have been doing that very faithfully. I was talking with someone on the program the other day, and they said, no, this is too much. I just want to work on one thing. Well, that's the idea, just to pick one thing or several things that you're going to stick with for a period of time. And once you feel like you master that, then go on to something else. In this 8-week program, we've been encouraging you to try these different things each week. And some of you may be saying, well, I don't need to try anymore. I've got 2 things that are working for me. And I know some of you have been doing that as well. So I want to introduce you to John. John, it's great to have you with us on tonight's program.
Thank you, Pastor.
So John is someone who actually knows me both as a physician and also by the fact that I do actually pastor a church. And so John knows me in both of those roles. But so you can, John, basically just kind of let us in a little bit on what, first of all, got you interested in even checking out the Fast 8 program.
Well, I knew I needed a change, and I was just going down the same road, just eating sweets all the time and just gaining more and more weight. And one thing that you said in the first part is to change one thing. And so on February the 20th, I told my wife, I said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I'm going to stop this. And so I decided to stop eating sugar, which was a really big change. I mean, it's very surprising when you say, I don't want any sugar, because everything has sugar in it. So, I mean, so we did it, and I stuck to it. I've messed up a little bit of carbs more than I probably should. But for the most part, it's been good. Since February the 20th, I've lost 26 pounds.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I feel like I'm a little clearer in the mind. I can remember my wife's name now. So that's a good thing.
So basically tell us how this all played out. And I hope folks aren't bothered too much, but you got kind of
I see that the screen's going.
Weird screen connection, but tell us a little bit about practically what have you been doing? Have you been reading labels? How have things changed? What's different now than back when before you said I was going to leave out the sugar?
Well, I do read the labels now. I never did before. I just throw it in my cart. Now I'm kind of being a little smarter. I've never been a big vegetable eater. My wife always teases me and says, don't forget to eat your vegetables. And I'm like, oh, leave me alone. You're not my mom. And so I started eating vegetables. And I mean, I was just like, I go to the grocery store now, and if somebody's seen what I have in my cart now, they would be really kind of like really surprised versus the old days. But so, yes, I've been looking at labels, and that's changed the way I'm eating. And I mean, every day I try to stick to it as close as I can possibly do without getting sugars. And I know you told me before I have to have some carbs. So I did some research on broccoli and cauliflower and all the different vegetables, and they have carbs in them. So because my mind, like you said, you got to have carbs. You're going to kind of be, I think I was a little grumpy too. So my wife would probably know. So I went through a little bit of a change. And one of the biggest things, I drank coffee for the longest time. And sometimes I'd be decaffeinated, sometimes I'd be a regular. But I'd be getting up every morning by 5:30, 6 o'clock. And my wife would always say, why can't you sleep in? Well, I finally stopped eating or drinking coffee and the cream and the sugar in it. And now I've been sleeping into 7:30 to 8 o'clock. And she thinks something's wrong. But I really surprised that sugar or caffeine was like waking me up. And so I definitely feel a lot clearer in the mind. That is the truth.
Well, that's tremendous, John. I so appreciate you sharing. We've got a very responsive group here. I don't know, does anyone else have any questions for John? I mean, you're maybe inspired by a story, maybe you're discouraged by a story. I don't know, but anyone have any questions for him, things you're wondering about? Well, John, okay, I think we've got someone here who's going to speak to that. Stacy?
What other carbs are you eating? Like what other healthier carbs?
Well, I've really been kind of careful on that. Once I did, though, the other day have a piece of bread. I really wanted carbs, and I did have that piece of bread, but I've just been trying to stay with just the vegetables to get my carbs in. It's been a little hard, but I mean, it's getting easier as you do it more in and day out. I'm not really having any cravings other than the bread the other day. So that answers that.
Yeah, well, let me kind of speak a little bit to that, why I had the discussion I had with John. And that is, if you're on a carbohydrate deficient diet, you will not be able to deliver enough tryptophan and tyrosine to your brain. Now, this is kind of crazy. I don't want to give you a long discussion about this, but I'll try to explain it as simply as I can. So tyrosine and tryptophan are amino acids. So they come from proteins. So you'd think, well, if I eat a lot of protein, I'm going to get plenty of tryptophan and tyrosine. Well, you do get plenty of tryptophan and tyrosine into your blood, but when you're eating a high protein diet, you get a bunch of other competing amino acids that compete to get into the brain with the tyrosine and tryptophan. Why the tyrosine and tryptophan are so important for your brain? Tryptophan is the building block for serotonin, a so-called feel-good, hormone, and then tyrosine is the building block for things like dopamine and norepinephrine, which are other important neurotransmitters. And they've actually found, John mentioned getting more grumpy or angry. They've found that if you are tyrosine deficient, you'll be more prone to, anger and things like that. And if you're tryptophan deficient, you can be more prone to depression. It varies depending on your personal tendencies as well. So it's not like, well, if every single person doesn't get enough tryptophan, they're all going to be depressed and end up in the mental institution. No, it's not like that. But the point is, you do need to get to deliver that tyrosine and tryptophan to the brain. And the crazy thing about it is the diet that helps best to get tyrosine and tryptophan into the brain is actually a high carb diet, because when the carbs are higher, it metabolically, it tends to raise insulin levels. Insulin not only works on blood sugar, it works on amino acids. It favorably affects the amino acid balance in your blood so that you move more tryptophan and tyrosine to your brain. So that's why, folks would say, well, I'm going to go on the Atkins diet. I'm going to go on the zero carb diet. I'm going to go keto. I'm going to go total keto. And yeah, they may lose a bunch of weight, but then they get discouraged or depressed, or people can't live with them. And I've never seen a person just, quote, stick with a keto diet their whole life, because it's not compatible with optimal brain chemistry. And also the typical keto diets that are high in animal products, there's a number of research studies showing they're hard on the kidneys, they raise inflammatory compounds in the body. So that's why I tell people, like I told John, I said, don't try to be on zero carbs. So the good carbs are the complex carbohydrates. And, John mentioned vegetables. Now, the leaf stem and flower vegetables are not high carb vegetables. High carb vegetables would be like your root vegetables, so your beets, your carrots, your potatoes, your sweet potatoes, those are going to be, and those are good quality complex carbohydrates. So those are good nutritional sources, vitamin rich. But they're not what we recommended with the leaf stem and flower fast, because they do have a lot more calories. And if you have diabetes or blood sugar problems, those root vegetables, for example, can bump up the blood sugar quite a bit. So yeah, beans actually kind of an interesting food. I did have someone who wrote in within the last week or two, and most people, and in most of the research, when people eat beans, it stabilizes their blood sugar, it blunts blood sugar rise. But this person was sharing how when they eat beans, their blood sugar consistently rises. And that's actually unusual in my experience and in the research. But all of us have different digestive abilities. It's possible that person actually makes an enzyme that digests some of the fiber in beans. By the way, that's what, if you take Beano actually digests some of the fiber in beans. So it makes them less gas producing, but also actually decreases their practical fiber content. So just an extra insight there. Any other questions for John before we move on to some other things? Okay.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Thank you.
And remember, we've heard from folks, some of you have shared your stories. We've heard from folks who've lost, 10, 20 pounds or more. We heard from someone who had lost a half a pound. And remember, it's not the absolute amount that you've lost. It's the issue. I heard a great illustration. I was listening to another weight loss audiobook recently. And sometimes when I'm traveling, I like to do that. And this author was saying, what would we think if someone had a size 10 foot and they were trying to wear size 6 shoes? What would you think? I mean, you'd say, like, why? I mean, it's going to be terribly uncomfortable. And they said, well, why do we have this preoccupation with some arbitrary size that we think our body should be? And that's part of the message we've been trying to communicate. So none of us know objectively what you should weigh. And if your weight equilibrates at 180 when you'd rather weigh 140, that's not, I'm saying you should affirm yourself, because if you're following healthy lifestyle habits and your weight stabilizes at 180, then that may be the best weight for you. With everything else going on in your life. And the reason I say it may be the best, because remember, you may have certain lifestyle factors that you can't control, maybe your work hours or other things, or the environment you're in, that may be predisposing you to carry some extra weight. But a lot of these things are early life history, intrauterine effects, genetic effects. And so don't punish yourself for something that's not controllable. I mean, the size of your foot is the size of your foot. And don't try to get into that, size 6 shoe if you're a size 10. Whether that illustration resonates with you, it's part of what we've been trying to communicate, that everybody, if you stick with this program, you're trying different things, you're trying to get healthier, trying to identify some things you could do differently for the rest of your life, then you are on a successful trajectory, and you will be a successful graduate. So that's the other thing I want to mention tonight. So originally we were thinking of just doing these 8 weekly sessions that just kind of supported you as you went through the program at the beginning of each week. But we said, you know what? We really should have a final session at the end of the program. So our next week's session will be week 8. That will introduce week 8. That will be pre-recorded. I'll be on the road again. I'll be in South Carolina. If any of you are in South Carolina, I'm going to be speaking at an event at a Christian camp called, I think it's called Nasoka Pines in South Carolina. So if you're there, we'd love to meet you. One of you met my wife and I when we were speaking in Michigan a few weeks ago. So if you're in the Carolinas, we'd be happy to meet you there. If you're not, we've already filmed the episode for next week. So we're especially in next week's episode, we're talking about a lot of things relating to being successful with long-term health behavior changes. So that's what the special feature is for the week 8, because we're trying to say, what can we do to help you not only to have chosen some things you want to be different long-term, but what kind of pitfalls might you face that would derail those good decisions? So that's the focus of the pre-recorded program that we'll be rolling out next week. It's filmed, but we haven't done all the post-production work. So it's not like we're keeping it back from you. You want to, I want to watch that tonight. Well, it's not actually ready. So it's been filmed, but we've got work to do behind the scenes before it'll be put up for you. But we're planning to have it ready. And release it at 7 p.m. next Saturday night. But then the following Saturday, which is April 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we're having a graduation program. And I'd love for as many of you as possible to either write in through the website, share your story, share your frustrations, because we really want to celebrate. First of all, celebrate that you finished the program. If someone says, I gained 5 pounds, if you gain 5 pounds and you've been making healthier choices, you're drinking more water, you were constantly dehydrated, now you're exercising when you weren't, maybe you built muscle mass, and you were running 10 pounds low on your weight because you were so dehydrated all the time. You're feeling better, your energy's better, you're successful, even though your weight may be up. So that's what we're interested in. And if some of you really feel you need some extra support, like, well, I didn't want to gain 5 pounds on a weight optimization program. Well, remember, our focus is on health and healthy lifestyle choices. So that's April 1. If some of you are wondering how to interact, the easiest way to do it is just go to timelesshealinginsights.org. Some of your browsers, you're going to have to put the www.timelesshealinginsights.org. And if you just go to that main webpage, you'll see all our programs. You'll see Fast 8 there, but don't scroll through any of the programs. Just look at the very top of the homepage. And on the far right side, you'll see different options at the top. Just click on Contact Us. Click on that, and it's pretty much instantaneous. I'm not monitoring at this minute because I'm talking with you, but if you clicked on that now and shared your story, we theoretically could access it. If you wanted to do that and share your story there and then say, hey, I put it up on the Contact Us, could you read it, Dr. DeRose? I mean, theoretically, I could do that as long as you get my attention in this live program, okay? So that's what's coming up. So any questions about where we're headed? Okay, any things that you've run into this last week that you're especially concerned about that I could help you with? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I put something in the chat, but also there's a few little potholes that I've hit this week, but nothing major. So I've tried to stick with eating between like 3 and 4, not later than that. But there's a few times that I've been really hungry, even like through the night. And I've just been drinking a lot of water. Of course, then I'm in the bathroom all the time. But there was one time where I think I ate around 3 and I went and did some stuff and I was super hungry. And so I was thinking about Burger King, but I went to Walmart and I bought a banana.
Okay.
So I thought it was a better choice, but it was 6 o'clock in the evening. So I don't know if you have any suggestions for when you really get hungry, what to do.
Yeah, so that's great. It's great. Let's kind of talk through several things. So one of the strategies that you use that often is effective is drinking water. So that can help sometimes. We talked about this concept earlier in the program, and that is if you're dehydrated or just thirsty, your body has a hard time differentiating between hunger and thirst. So keeping well hydrated is really important. A second strategy that actually works for some people is brushing their teeth.
And I've done that too.
Yeah. So for some people that will help, brushing their teeth. The other thing that we talked about in the program, and I'll re-emphasize this, and I do talk about it next week too, I think some, and that is the least effective behavior change strategy is to focus on what you're not going to do. So if you're focused on not eating, it's very hard to focus on not eating, because when you're thinking about not eating, what are you necessarily thinking of? Eating, right?
Eating, yeah.
Yeah. So the most effective strategies are to think of what you are going to do. So if, for example, if you say, okay, that was really bad. I was really hungry. It was 6 p.m. and I just kept thinking about eating food. Well, the more engaging an activity, the better. So let's say you had a garden outside and it was not at the stage where there were just fruits hanging from the vine that you would be tempted to eat. You could go out and start working in the garden vigorously and just try to get really engaged with something. Or there's a hobby that you really like, or you're a musician, or you're a seamstress, or if there's something that you can really get involved with. But if the main focus is I've just got to not be thinking about eating, but you say, but I'm hungry, my body's calling for food. So let me tell you that last aspect to it. Unfortunately, our bodies typically call for food when our bodies are used to eating. And so what happens is when we're trying to develop a new habit, you still have some of these habit patterns and timing patterns. Some of them, it may not just be the hour of the clock. It may be, if you really thought about it, whenever you finished a big job, you would eat. That was what you used to do. So you may not consciously be thinking of that, but you just finished this big task. And that's been like your reward for the last, 30 years. You'd sit down and you'd have a piece of cake and ice cream. And now you're trying to break that pattern. So your body is saying, hey, I just did this big project and this is time for my reward. And
Mhm.
one of the places where we see that really clearly is with behaviors that are done very frequently. So classically, we saw this a lot in people who were smokers when I used to do a lot of work with nicotine addiction. So people who smoke, you're smoking repetitively throughout the day. I mean, it can be that way with eating too for many people. And there are things that they're smoking, we could say in this case, or eating, could be tied to. And if you don't realize that, we're going to do some exercises next week where we try to help you identify what the high risk times are to try to start looking at those things, and then have a contingency plan. What are you going to do instead of eating? What are you going to do instead of having the soft drink or whatever thing you're trying to make a break with? So we'll try to give you a little bit more perspective on that too in the next segment. Okay.
Mhm.
The bottom line, though, is the longer you stick with something, the longer you stick with these patterns, the less likely you should have those cravings. Any other questions tonight? I did see what you put in the chat too, Stacy, and maybe I'll read that just for everyone's benefit. So, and actually, let me see if I can get this enabled. If some of you guessed, I'm actually working off of 2 computers. We find that works better when I'm sharing my screen. And I see Mari with a hand up too, even though I think I may have lost you for a minute. We'll get to you in a minute too. So Stacy is saying here, hello. She was on the Wednesday support group and she asked if she could repeat the program over again. What I meant to say is, will there be more participants after this Fast 8 ends? Now, you're not a lawyer, are you, Stacy?
No.
Okay, then this is just a typo because I think you meant to say I could use the support, but it said I could sue the support.
That was
Okay.
accident.
Okay, that's what I figured. Okay, I could use the support. However, I know you're very busy, Dr. DeRose. Okay, this has blessed me so much. Yeah, so so what I hear you asking is, would we be willing to start another Wednesday support group? Is that?
Or just like what we're doing now,
Mhm.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
with
Right. I've actually kind of been thinking about this. And let me see what I can come up with between now and April 1. Okay. So let me see what we can do about that. Um, then Mari, your hand's up, and then we'll take Bonnie's chat question. So Mari, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Yes, thank you very much for your program. It has helped me a lot.
Well, wonderful. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So what's on your mind tonight?
Well, what's in my mind tonight is that I no longer drink coffee, but for some reason I've been craving coffee. And when I go to the store, I've been finding, I guess the vegan version of the coffee, which has all these plant ingredients instead of the coffee.
Mhm.
So would you consider taking those throughout the day snacking?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question. So what about caloric beverages? Do you have one of them handy? Is it like a Postum or Aroma, or do you know which one? Do you have something handy that you could get the box and look at the ingredients with us?
Yeah, actually, I have one that I was thinking about getting. It's right here. Yeah, and the ingredients seem to be, it's right here. Is this one? It says ingredients. It's, let's see. It says, let's see.
So while you're looking at that, common ingredients would be cereal grains, chicory, and sometimes yes, some other plant constituents. So there's a number of these plant beverages that are made to be a hot drink to take the place of coffee. And of course, they're not going to have caffeine. The ones that, at least the kind of the classic ones, they don't have caffeine. There might be some on the market that do now, and I do advise against that. But the other aspect to it is there's going to be some calories in them. So have you been able, Mari, to find the ingredients and the amount of calories per serving?
Yes, it says ingredients. It says black pepper, clove, cardamom, ginger, Ceylon cinnamon. It says nutmeg,
Okay.
and I didn't see no sugar.
Okay. And do they have a calorie amount
Yeah.
on it?
It says 3.
Okay. So that's going to be a very low calorie beverage. Some of those, I will tell you, some of those constituents in there for some people can be irritating to the digestive tract. So some of the ones, so that's one that's designed to have low calories, but some of the constituents may be more irritating to some people. Some of the older ones like Postum and Roma, I think you'll find have more calories, but they tend not to have any irritants in their constituents. So to come to your question, what if you're using those during the day? You would like a hot beverage. The first thing I would say is there is a hot beverage that many people don't think about. It's actually hot water. And people say hot water, but I mean, come on, hot water. It is a hot beverage, and I'm not just saying that like as a joke, but I do like hot water sometimes. If I'm cold, I'll have hot water. I mean, you could, an herb tea would be the same idea as what you're talking about. So, or one of these, herbal coffees or coffee substitutes. So yeah, I think there's definitely a place for those, but the more calories there are, and the more you're eating them between meals, of course, that is going to give you some caloric intake between meals and can keep you theoretically looking for some calories between meals. So when the Roma is not available, and you're traveling, are you going to want to stop and have a regular coffee with cream and sugar? Are you going to want to pick up a candy bar? So that's one of the questions people don't think about. Like, are we keeping some of those old habit pathways alive? And the beautiful thing about this program is you choose, Mari, whether that's important for you on your program or not. I'm excited if you make progress and you say, you know what, this is a lot better than the coffee was doing for me. I'm tolerating it better, and I'm going to try that. That would be, your decision. If it were me, I would say, if you'd say, is that really the ideal? From my vantage point, maybe not, but it's not about what's ideal for me. It's about what's best for you, what works best for you at this point. So it is really a program that's designed to empower you. And I love what you're doing. You're asking questions, you're looking at ingredients, you're saying, might this work for me? And if you decide that it does, that's great. Someone's asking a related question before we get to you, Bonnie, and that is about Ticino. I think I've heard of Ticino, but I don't know what's in it. So Mary Alice, if you're able to help us with that, either on screen or in the chat, we'd value that. So while you're working on that, we're going to go to Bonnie's question. So Bonnie says, I'm not diabetic, but friends and family are. Are sweet potatoes okay for diabetics? So basically, when we work with people with diabetes, I typically like them to be, working toward a whole foods, plant-based diet. So using those whole plant foods and sweet potatoes, even white potatoes, carrots, those are all in those categories. Realize though that many of those foods have a higher glycemic index. That means they'll tend to raise the blood sugar more. Sweet potatoes do seem to be better, or at least tend to raise the blood sugar less than white potatoes for many people. But the point is, it really has to do with a mixed meal. So, for example, watermelon also tends to raise blood sugar a lot. Grapes, bananas. So I don't tell people with diabetes that they can't eat those things. I say, monitor your blood sugar before and after your meal. If we're trying to learn how different foods affect their blood sugar with the other things they're doing with their medicines, or if it's all lifestyle controlled, then check your blood sugar before the meal and then check it 2 hours after. Keep a careful log of what you ate. And if you say, whoa, my blood sugar was 100 before the meal, all I ate, Dr. DeRose, was watermelon, corn on the cob, and potato, and my blood sugar went up to 300. Well, then what I would say is, well, that's not a really good meal choice for you. Add some beans, cut the potato in half, have less of the watermelon, maybe have some nuts or seeds. So things with higher fat content, plant fat content tend to help stabilize the blood sugar. They help to slow stomach emptying. And then the beans, like we mentioned earlier, things with soluble fiber tend also to stabilize blood sugar. Maybe try adding the guar gum, either in a jello form, eating that before the meal, or actually having, like we've talked about on several occasions, having something like the psyllium seed husk, like a Metamucil, or Consul is another brand of psyllium seed husk, or just going to the health food store. Have the psyllium seed husk, a tablespoon in 8 ounces of cold water, and just drink that down. That can also help to stabilize the blood sugar when you eat some of these higher glycemic index foods. Okay. Mary Alice, it looks like you have the Ticino there. Is that what you're showing us? So I'm not hearing any volume from you though. Are you muted, or yeah, there you go. So what have we got there? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this one is dandelion turmeric, and the ingredients are organic carob, organic chicory, organic dandelion, organic licorice root, organic turmeric, organic ginger, and natural coffee flavor. And it's 28 calories and 10 ounces.
That sounds fairly reasonable. Yeah, so the ginger is an interesting compound. For some people, it has a kind of a stomach settling effect. For some other people, it can be a little bit of irritant. So it's got dandelion. Dandelion's very, very nutrient rich, and dandelion has diuretic properties. Licorice can, in some people, can raise blood pressure if there's much of it in there. And licorice also can do some weird stuff with your blood electrolytes, especially if you're on medication. But it's hard to, when it's an ingredient in a mixed preparation, it's hard to know how much you're getting. But I would say just if you have high blood pressure, keep an eye out. Go ahead and try it. And if your blood pressure goes up 20 points every time you drink a cup of it, then you may want to rethink that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I've got someone else. Oh, Dandy Blend there. Yeah. Okay, with 5 calories. Roasted barley, rye, chicory root, dandelion root, and sugar beets with only 5 calories. That sounds pretty reasonable. Oh, there it is, Dandy Blend. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Barbara. Okay, that's is that all the ingredients that are in it? The roasted barley, rye, chicory root, dandelion, and sugar beets?
Yes.
Okay, that's of the ones you've mentioned. There's nothing that I would have any concern about in that one. Now, sure, you could be allergic to, to barley or rye. It could be allergic to anything, and that's where we want to go next. So we'll take some of your other questions. We do want to devote extra time for your questions, but I want to make sure that we do get to the handout and some of the material there too. So let me run over that with you right now. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and feel free to continue to send things through the chat, and we'll try to get to that at 8 o'clock. So remember how we do this from 7 to 8. We go through our main content for the program, and then from 8 to 8:30, we go ahead and take some of your other questions. So let's talk a little bit about elimination diets. So the question is, first of all, why consider an elimination diet? And these are really powerful, especially if you have food allergies, food sensitivities, I've used them in people with autoimmune diseases over the years. And basically the idea of an elimination diet is you're limiting your diet to try to see if you can then identify if there's some foods that have been causing problems for you. And this is, it's a significant issue for many people. So you see my definition there of an elimination diet. And I say elimination diet, conjures up images of, you're starting with a lot of food and then gradually eliminating things. Well, it's just the opposite. So a true elimination diet, and I know we've touched on this a little bit with you, but I really want to emphasize this because you start with the most restrictive diet. And I mentioned one of the classic the most classic one is you go on a water only fast. And I don't recommend that to folks unless they're under medical supervision, especially if you're on prescription drugs. I mean, you really need to be talking with someone because prescription drugs can do some weird things with your electrolytes and stuff and your metabolism. So if you're not on any prescription drugs and you're healthy, yeah, plenty of people have gone on water only fasts, but that's the most strict elimination diet, just a water only fast or a distilled water only fast or distilled water with charcoal filtration. You're basically just trying to have pure water, nothing else. That would be the strictest elimination diet. And then you gradually add things back. So elimination diets, you can see down there. One of the other kind of classic ones was just starting with a kind of more hypoallergenic grain like millet and pears. It's another kind of classic elimination diet. So let's say you have bad arthritis and you're wondering, are there some of my foods that are triggering or perpetuating this arthritis? Okay, let's say it's rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune arthritis, and you haven't tolerated some of the strong medications or you don't want to take them. And you have, hot red joints. You wake up in the morning, your joints are stiff for 3 hours every morning. So that's a great situation to try an elimination diet, by the way. The worse you are, the easier it is to tell if the elimination diet helps you. So if you just start eating pears and millets and 2 days later you say, boy, I was only stiff for an hour, my joints are less swollen, I'm feeling much better. Well, it's very likely that there's something in your diet then. And so what do you do then? Well, then you start gradually adding things back, one food at a time. And so what we've done for you is you have this elimination diet protocol. And I've put a lot of extra material in there. This is designed for people that have hives. There's a lot of people that get unexplained hives. We get these red welts that come up itchy, move around. So we've got some other things here that can trigger skin reactions like cosmetics, fabric softeners, jewelry. Nickel is a common allergen, and a lot of jewelry has nickel in it, even if it's mostly gold or mostly silver. There can be nickel in it. And I've seen people come in and they've got, pierced ears and it's all peeling and oozing and red around the piercing, and it's because they have a nickel allergy. They keep putting the earrings in and it keeps irritating it. So you can see there a list of some other things to exclude that are non-food items, and that'd be especially for skin-related allergies. But then when we come down to the actual elimination diet description, you'll see here basically several categories of food. So we kind of talk you through the general perspective, and I've just tried to do that for you. If you think I wrote it better than I've explained it, that's why we have it more than one form. Then you can see here this elimination diet food chart. So if some of you say, there's no way I am just going to eat pears and millet. Well, you say, but I want to try a modified elimination diet. Well, what you might do then is just leave off everything in the level 2, in the level 1 column. Okay. So those are the most allergenic things in the level 1 column. So you'll see the gluten containing grains there, the barley, rye, and wheat, of course. Oats, if it's not certified gluten-free, if it's certified gluten-free, you can have oats. So barley, rye, and wheat, you'll be excluding those. When it comes to nuts, seeds, and legumes, you see if you're just doing the modified elimination diet. So that means you can have corn and rice and millet. Those are the grains that you could have this week if you wanted to try a modified elimination diet. See, basically you're trying a gluten-free diet, but that might be all you do. You might just say, hey, I'm just going to focus on the grains and try gluten-free for a week. See if that makes a difference. But you may say, no, I've got some bad allergies. I'm going to leave off the nuts and the soy. That's in that nuts, seeds, and legumes. But you can have other seeds and other legumes. So you could have lentils, black beans, sesame seeds, poppy seeds, etc. Some of you might say, hey, that's all too much for me. I've been changing enough. I've seen a lot of people over the years who dairy was part of the reason they were having, I mean, there's all kinds of problems I've seen with dairy, intestinal problems, and it may not be like a full-blown lactose intolerance, but over the years, I've seen people, I'd say, well, try leaving dairy off. I don't have any problem with dairy. Well, try leaving it off. I remember one woman once and all her problems went away. She left the dairy off. I've had other people left dairy off. It did nothing. Okay, it's not like a panacea. Think of another woman once who had terrible allergies, been seen allergists and had all these, sinus problems. And she left the dairy out and her sinus problems just went away. And again, other people with bad sinus problems, dairy avoidance made no difference. So an elimination diet isn't like, oh, everyone's got to do this. But if you have some kind of like health issues that you wonder, I mean, could they be diet related? This is a great time to try that. And again, like I'm explaining to you, it could just be a single thing. You could just say, yeah, I'm just going to try the go dairy free and read labels. So if you're going to be totally dairy free, then you have to read labels and avoid any dairy constituents. So common dairy constituents would be like whey or milk protein or milk solids, or it may not even say milk, it may say casein. Casein is the milk protein. So if you're going to be, strictly avoiding dairy, you'd read labels and you'd avoid those things. So you can go through this list. And the idea would be if you leave something off and you feel like you're doing better, then after a week or so of this, then you could add something back. So let's say, listen, I just think I have some problems with some fruits. I'm not going to change anything, but I'm going to leave off the berries and the citrus because I kind of wondered if some of the fruits are bothering me. So you're still having your bananas and your kiwis and your melons and apples and all, but for the week you've left off it doesn't mean the berries and the citrus are bad. It's just that more people tend to have sensitivity to those fruits than other fruits. So you say, well, okay, I've been off it for a week and I'm feeling better. I'm not having, my mouth is not breaking out. And so, well, what do you do then? Well, then after you've done that for a week, then try adding back just one berry. Say, let's say you're going to try blackberries because you don't eat those that much. Try one that you haven't had as much exposure to. You're less likely to be allergic to that. Just the way allergies often work in susceptible people. So, okay, I'll try blackberries on Monday. And so you don't just have 2 pints of blackberries, but have some blackberries, with the rest of your meal the same. And see if next day or two, you're fine. You had blackberries that one day, didn't bother you. Okay, well, then next day, maybe you're going to try raspberries. And maybe, wait a couple days. You add something new every couple days. Then you say, well, I really want to try oranges. And so you have orange and then your mouth breaks out and you say, oh, maybe I've got a problem with oranges. So you see kind of how the idea of an elimination diet works. So you don't have to do an elimination diet this week, but it's something that's a powerful fasting strategy. And I felt because some of the questions that some of you are having, it would be at least worth giving you this material. And there's a lot in there that you can kind of explore. So there's also a section down here about things that you can use that are anti-inflammatory herbs. Some of you have been asking about those natural things that you can do for inflammation. You see Ginger is on there as an anti-inflammatory. The ones we most use, my wife and I, turmeric, boswellia, and the section above, the omega-3 fats. So either ground flaxseed or flaxseed oil. Those are the most common natural anti-inflammatories that we use. Okay, then what not to eliminate. So this is what I alluded to earlier. One of you in particular asked about some of the things that were in our book, 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure Control. And fortunately, I have a very good relationship with the publisher. If some of you know the backstory on that, you probably would understand why. But the publisher graciously allowed us to put some of the illustrations from our book, 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure Control, in this handout. You've seen a number of them already. And we included several others. So it doesn't mean you couldn't have an allergy to some of these things, but these ACE inhibitory compounds are natural blood pressure lowering compounds. So you notice that these are all plant foods. And theoretically, eating more broccoli, spinach, mushrooms, even potatoes and peanuts could be part of a program that helps to naturally lower your blood pressure. So this is a list of some of the foods that have been found to have these natural ACE inhibitory compounds that are natural blood pressure lowering. So just something worth considering. Then we also reproduced a couple of other handouts. Magnesium is something we often recommend. You can see here, magnesium can help with blood sugar and blood pressure, helps regulate bowel habits, especially if you're constipated. If you get too much magnesium, it can make your stools too loose. But you'll notice there that there's a list that follows of magnesium-rich foods. And why we're including it here is we're talking about elimination diets. A lot of the foods that you'll see in these nutrient-rich categories are not things that we see a lot of problems with. So if you look here at this list, I can't ever remember seeing someone with a sensitivity to molasses. I'm sure they exist. Pumpkin seeds, I've not seen someone allergic to pumpkin seeds. I'm sure there are people with it, but it's just not one of the frequent allergies that I have seen over the years. Watermelon, I have seen more allergies with, and you can see that's the number 8 leading magnesium champion. Isn't that amazing? Watermelon seeds also have diuretic properties. So you may want to think twice before throwing out your watermelon seeds. Anyway, just kind of an interesting sidelight there. And then the last table that we have here at your request is with potassium. So your plant products are generally rich in potassium. And if you're eating a lot of those leaf, stem, and flower vegetables, you're likely getting a lot of potassium. And that's generally good. Now, if you have kidney failure, magnesium and potassium are things that you should be avoiding. You shouldn't, well, let's put it this way. You're probably working already with a renal dietitian, but you don't want to just start taking a potassium or magnesium supplement if you have kidney problems, okay? But you can see here, a lot of the potassium champions are, they're leaf vegetables. You can see beet greens, you can see cabbage, amaranth leaves. I've never tried those, but you can just take a look at that list there. Watercress, Swiss chard, and making it to the number 15th item there. This is a ranking. At the time we wrote our book, it came out about 7 years ago. We went through the USDA database, did a search of all the top foods in each of these categories. And these actually were the top foods in each of these categories. They say, well, you know, who's eating purslane? Actually, purslane, if you look it up, it often grows as a weed. And it's interesting. Some of these things that grow very prolifically, like dandelion and purslane, are very nutrient rich. So just kind of an interesting sidelight. Okay, so we also put this table of calcium champions, and this is probably the most surprising one to people. You know, we mentioned avoiding dairy. possibly on this elimination diet. So this is an especially important table because people think, oh, if I'm leaving off dairy, I won't get calcium. I won't be able to get my calcium. The real critical thing is not how much calcium is in a food, it's how much calcium per calorie, especially when we're talking about weight loss, right? Or weight optimization. So it's not a question of, oh, there's a bunch of calcium here. Oh, there's a bunch of calcium with a bunch of calories. That necessarily isn't your best calcium source. So the best calcium sources are listed right here. So you can see things like stinging nettles, blanched stinging nettles. So this is a Native American staple, I'm told, in some places. So nettles, nopales, the cactus pads, very rich in calcium. You can see here other things that might be more familiar to you, like tofu, mustard greens, turnip greens, lamb's quarters, another weed, that's what people call it, but very rich calcium source, collards. You can see some of the cheeses did make the list, but these are going to be, generally, these are non-fat or fat-free cheeses you see that we have there, but many of the cheeses, of course, are high in fat and also very high in sodium. So keep that in mind as well. So that's really, that really covers what's in the handout. And remember, week 8, next week, we'll be talking about the challenge for you will be setting these long-term goals, really solidifying kind of the things that are going to be different long-term. And then hopefully a number of you joining us April 1st. If you can't join us or don't want to share live, then please jump on and share your story anyway. We really are anxious to hear from you. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to transition to your questions. I see a number of you have submitted things through the chat. So I am just navigating over there. And we've got another question that has come through. Feel free to send things through the chat or get my attention. We'll take up to a half an hour if you have specific questions about the program to address those at this point. But for those of you that do need to leave, it is just about 8 o'clock. We've been glad that you've jumped on again. Continue just really 2 more weeks of the program. So this next week and the following week, that will complete 8 weeks. So April 1 really is officially the last day of the program. So we will have the graduation. If I can come up with some type of certificate that we can allow you to print out, I will do that. If any of you have access to a camera-ready certificate that I'm not going to be violating any copyright infringement, or if you're an artist and you want to design the official Fast 8 graduation certificate, we'll even let you put your your initials on it or designed by. It would be a wonderful thing you could do to contribute to the program. That just came to my mind. I didn't have that rehearsed. Anyway, let me take some of these questions here for us. So the first one that we haven't answered yet: what do you think about low metabolism in individuals, I'm assuming, who are over 40, and the need to eat 1,100 calories, including 2 snacks, for effective weight loss? Okay, so let's talk about the whole idea of calories and weight loss. We've touched on this some, but I'm glad the question came up. So here's the deal. First of all, everyone has a different basal metabolic rate. For some people, it's theoretically possible that those 1,100 calories, especially if they're eaten later in the day, now I know, talking about spreading them out and a couple of snacks as well, but let's just, let me make this point. If you take in all those calories later in the day, 1,100 calories, it's theoretically possible for some of you, even though it's a pretty low calorie diet, is theoretically possible that for some of you that would not help you lose weight. If you take those same 1,100 calories, the same foods, and you ate them early in the day, and then fasted after noon or 3 or 4, and again, the reason I'm not giving you a direct time is I don't know what your basal metabolic rate is. You can go to a kind of a high-tech, often a university center that has metabolic testing. They can actually measure your metabolic rate, tell you what your basal metabolic rate is. But here's the thing, you can change it. You can change your basal metabolic rate by building more muscle. So lean body mass, muscle mass, is the main determinant of BMR. So if you went to your local university and they said, oh yeah, we have this great program for only $1,000, we'll, put you in a body box and you'll get you on the, metabolic cart, and we'll tell you all these things, your VO2 max and your BMR and all this. You say, that's a lot of money, but I'm going to do it. And they say, well, your BMR is 950. You're only burning 950 calories a day if you're just at rest, like laying in bed. You say, oh, that's terrible. Well, you can change it. You can change it by building more muscle mass. So I don't like arbitrarily setting a certain number of calories. Now, having said that, if this is a program that works for you, I mean, you're welcome to do that. And I do find there's a small percentage of people I've worked with over the years who are really into like counting calories, and that's something that really helps them be disciplined. And if that's a tool that has worked for you, great. But here's the flip side of it. We talked about this learning to differentiate hunger and appetite. That to me is really the most powerful principle. I was the audiobook I was listening to that I referred to earlier was entitled Intuitive Eating. And it's talking a lot about these aspects of hunger and satiety and things. And the other reason I don't like arbitrary calorie amounts is you actually may need more calories in a meal. I'll tell you just true story. Today at breakfast, I'm usually really hungry at breakfast. I was not that hungry at breakfast. And at lunch, I was really, really hungry. And so I felt I needed a lot more calories at lunch. And so I ate them. If I was arbitrarily counting how many calories I was supposed to eat at lunch, I wouldn't have gotten what I think my body needed. Okay. And if I had felt I needed to eat so many calories at breakfast, I probably would have overeaten. So if you learn to be in touch with hunger and appetite, that is the most powerful. And I think I mentioned this illustration to you earlier in the program. If your body's fighting something, it may be not wanting to eat much at all. You might sit down and eat 100 or 200 calories and your body's saying that's enough. And you're thinking, well, I got to eat my 1,100 calories. I mean, that's deficient enough. No, if your body's saying 100 or 200 calories is enough, walk away from the table. And you won't be hungry afterward because your body didn't need any more. So anyway, to me, that's the most powerful approach. But again, anything that's working for you, if it's working for you, there's nothing wrong with doing it. Okay. So let me come to the next question here. And I've got two devices. One's easier to navigate than the other. Okay. So the next one is a YouTube comment. And by the way, thank you for those of you that are monitoring the YouTube comments for me. And that one says, thank you for the excellent program. When you mentioned to take psyllium, how about chia seed that has been hydrated? Yeah, so chia seed is an omega-3 fat-rich seed. It's an option, but psyllium seed husk, I'm pretty sure has no calories. Chia seed's going to have the omega-3 fat, which has anti-inflammatory effects, but it will have more calories. So again, it's not that you can't have any calories, but the guar gum and the psyllium seed husk are fibers. They're just strictly fiber. So when you have those, when you make a jello out of those, it's 0 calories. And so that's one of the reasons we kind of have especially used it over the years, especially with fasting regimens. So it allows someone to be, we've even had people on quote total fast where they're not getting any calories, but we're giving them the guar gum and the psyllium based jellos. So yeah, so you can use the chia, but it's going to be a little bit different. And then this person also shared, for the person hungry eating at 4 p.m. And water isn't enough. Okay, so yeah, I appreciate this. They said I found that was a problem for me too until I added potatoes to my last meal. And that does bring up an important point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So certain foods in certain people are digested more efficiently. And carbohydrates in general, especially simple carbohydrates, are digested the most efficiently, or well-cooked complex carbohydrates. That could be good or it may not be good. So if you want something that sticks with you longer, you want to include more fiber and more fat in particular. So the potatoes were working good for that person, but the point here is find something, experiment with some things that slow the stomach emptying. And the ones that I like to use are the fats, good fats like eating some more olives or avocado, ground flax or the chia seed. Those are all good healthy fat sources. Some more nuts. Those things can help that last meal you ate stave you over. And the soluble fiber also has to do, I'll remind you about this, it has to do with something called CCK. And that's the abbreviation for cholecystokinin. And when you have a higher soluble fiber intake, it keeps the CCK levels up higher. And CCK is involved with giving satiety, holding you between meals, if you will. And so that's another thing. Another reason why the guar gum and the psyllium seed husk we've recommended over the years, having those benefits. Okay, so next we're coming to this here. Almond milk is high in sodium. I found low sodium in oat milk. Is there any advantage to stop using nut milks? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. For a variety of reasons, we've had you watch the high sodium and the high sugar foods. Sodium is more of a problem if you have issues with fluid retention that's contributing to your weight, or if you have blood pressure issues. So some people are sensitive to the sodium, and a lot of people with weight issues, I've seen people lose, I remember one guy, he lost like 40 pounds in a week just because we were targeting his sodium balance. He was just retaining so much fluid. So that's unusual that someone's going to be retaining that much fluid, but it is a real thing. And so sodium is a concern that I have. And if you've tried something, you try real low sodium for a week and you said, all my food tasted terrible, it made no difference with my weight, my blood pressure was fine, then sodium may not be a big deal for you, okay? But the advantage to stop using nut milks, the other thing is nuts are relatively highly allergenic for some people. I have no problem with any nuts, and I enjoy nuts. So it's not, I'm not saying that there's a reason to leave out nuts just because they're nuts. But remember, the focus this week was on elimination diets. And if you have some weird stuff, digestive issues, joint issues, skin rashes, any kind of stuff, and especially, you've been to multiple doctors and they're saying, well, we can't find anything wrong. An elimination diet is something it's worth considering. And one of the things that we do leave out we leave out those nuts. You remember that's one of the things that we will leave off. Okay. So someone sent me a direct message, and I'm assuming it's just because they don't want their name identified, which is fine. So this individual was asking about having more of a tendency to bleed. At least I'm assuming they're asking about blood in the bowel movements. I'll just read the question. Why do I bleed when I eat tomatoes or spaghetti sauce or grape juice when I have a bowel movement? So if they're really having blood mixed with the stool, they could have an undiagnosed inflammatory bowel condition, maybe a low-grade Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. And some of the people that have done research with food sensitivities in these diseases, at least one of the people that I became aware of who did research on this years ago was a woman by the name of Virginia Allen Jones. It was A-L-U-N. It may have even been hyphenated. Allen Jones was the last name. and she may not even be alive. She did a lot of research into digestive disorders, everything from irritable bowel syndrome to some of these inflammatory bowel conditions. So inflammatory bowel conditions actually can cause damage to the intestinal lining, can cause bleeding into the stool, for example. And she found that many people actually did have food sensitivities. And so doing an elimination diet could help identify that. But it sounds like you've maybe done kind of just by doing a diet history or diet observation, if you really have a lot of irritation, or if it's really blood mixed with the stool. And the reason I'm saying that is sometimes other things can just irritate, like hemorrhoids or things, and can kind of flare up the hemorrhoids. And that will be blood usually on the surface of the stool, or blood when you wipe. But if there's blood mixed with the stool, and you say, well, how would I know that? Well, I think you could figure out how you could know it, but you have to do a little bit of inspection, and may not be the most pleasing thing to talk about, but it's worth knowing. If the blood is mixed with the stool, then it's usually typically coming from, higher up in the intestine. Okay. So, and the answer to that would be then, if you do have a problem with it, then you leave it off. And if you say, but I love tomatoes and spaghetti sauce, and I'm Italian and I love grape juice, well, then you have to decide, is how bad a problem is this? I mean, if it really is an inflammatory bowel disease, you want to get that checked out, because there can be other things that go along with it besides just bowel irritation. So, you don't want to keep stirring that up. Okay, someone's asking a question about beet juice. How much beet juice is too much beet juice? I eat beets, canned, but pass blood clots when I go to the bathroom. I don't think this is from the beets. So my general concern when we talk about weight optimization when it comes to juice is not, so if we're talking about bleeding or inflammation stuff, that's a food sensitivity issue. And remember, if you're really sensitive to a food, the most effective strategy is to leave that food off. Okay. Now, my bigger concern with juices is just the amount of calories you get with juices for relatively little satiety. So that's the other thing you want to be aware of, that you'll get a lot of calories, relatively little satisfaction, and you'll be more prone to put on weight. So I generally discourage people who are trying to trim down, even if they're just trying to lose a few pounds. I would say, like we saw, one of the fasts, remember, was leaving off those caloric beverages. So that would apply to juice as well. We have another direct message. I have a lot of food sensitivities, 50 plus years of age, leaky gut, polycystic kidneys, high blood pressure. I weigh 110 pounds. Okay.
Actually, that's me. The 50 plus is my age is 50 plus, but my food sensitivities is 50 plus food sensitivities.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Okay. That's a lot of food sensitivities. And yeah, so we have found, I'm glad you mentioned this. This is really some really very interesting stuff about elimination diets. So if a person goes on an elimination diet, and let's say, so everyone can follow along, let's say they identify 10 foods and they leave those 10 foods out for a period of time. In your case, it's going to be 50 plus. But for many people, what we do, the way I use my table is you would add back something. Let's say, let me put this table back up just so we're not speaking theoretically. We're actually showing you all something. Okay, so let's share that. Okay, so let me scroll back up here. Don't look at this if you don't want to get dizzy. Okay, once we get this on the screen here for you. Okay. So you see the way this is laid out. So let's say among the 50 plus foods was even millet. But millet because it's in this always permissible, that means these are very low, they tend to be hypoallergenic foods. So it doesn't mean you can't be allergic to millet, okay? So, but what would happen is if you leave off those 50 plus foods, and they include millet, corn, rice, barley, rye, oats, what I'm saying is if you're going to add a grain back, don't add wheat. The grain that you would add back first would be millet. And what we would do is we'd wait a period of time. So let's say you wait, a couple months and you feel like things have quieted down because you got on a really strict elimination diet. Maybe there's some other things that are beside the 50 plus you've identified. I hate to say this, but I mean, it's possible there's some other things too. And that's the, maybe I'll get to that in a minute, but let's just stick with where we're at on this trajectory. So let's say you're off everything that's bothering you for a month or 2 months, then try adding the millet back. And if you say, whoa, nothing happened, don't just have millet the next day or don't have it 2 days later, still leave the millet off for a month. Just go, and some of you have heard of the concept of a rotation diet. So what we actually recommend in people that have a lot of food sensitivities is even if they've got a big long list, we say what you are able to eat, do it on a rotation diet. And kind of a typical rotation diet is every 4th day. And I know that's really hard if you don't have a lot of things that you can eat. It's like, well, I eat bananas one day and the next, but the idea is if you eat a food one day, you don't have it for 4 days. And so we just have a very expanded rotation diet with the foods you were sensitive to and adding them back. I worked with, had the privilege actually when I was in my internal medicine residency of working with a guy who was a world recognized allergist, headed up one of the allergist societies and did a lot of work with elimination diets. And I remember him telling me stories about people, they even, they would do different, blood tests and, just, reintroducing things blindly. And they were clearly sensitive to certain foods, but after they got off them for a period of time, they could go back to eating them sporadically. And how sporadically? Just start very slowly, maybe add the millet back once a month. It's not bothering you. You say, dare I try, every 3 weeks? And so you can, theoretically, people have been able to gradually add things back. And then if you say, oh no, I had it after 2 weeks and I broke out or my joints got bad or whatever, well, then you got to stay off it for several months and say, okay, it looks like the millet, probably I can't have it more frequently than, once every 3 weeks, once every month. Okay.
I did forget to mention that in addition to all of that, I have an overgrowth of yeast. So millet and pear sounds delicious to me, but technically I shouldn't really have the pears.
Yeah.
Or any fruits.
Yeah. So the yeast, that's an interesting one. The tree. So this is not, there are people that get yeast infection, literal infection in their blood. I mean, it's life-threatening, okay? But this is so there are some people that do seem to have some sensitivities to yeast-related things. And one of the typical approaches is a low, simple carb diet and avoiding, simple sugars and things. But we have found people even who feel that they have that tendency, that they can still use some of the higher carb foods. So it just depends, on the individual. So yeah, you can kind of experiment with that. We do have some other questions coming through, so let me navigate down there. Okay, so someone says, I've been told that I should eat a bit of protein after a workout to build muscle. Is this true? Well, let's talk a little bit about protein and muscle. And some of you, if you know me in person, you would size me up. I would categorize myself as athletic and fit, but I'm not a bodybuilder. Okay, so people don't come to me saying, Dr. DeRose, how can I bulk up? I see that you're doing a lot of that. Having said that, you do need protein to build muscles. There's no question about that. But most people are getting plenty of protein to build all the muscle that they'd be building with what they're doing. Okay. So I have not found it particularly helpful in just the general populace. Now, if you're working with a personal trainer and a nutritionist and they have you doing some things, then I'm going to defer to their judgment, individualizing to you. But the average person, and I'll tell you my own story. I was not raised on a plant-based diet. I was eating lots of animal products, and there came a point in my life where I said, hey, I want to leave these things off. But I was very worried that I would not be getting enough protein. And so I'm just eating all these nuts and these seeds and everything. And I ended up then analyzing my diet and found that I was just getting huge amounts of protein. I was getting like triple the amount of protein I needed. So it's actually hard to be on a low protein diet if you're making other good lifestyle choices. So, I mean, sure, if you're eating, a bunch of candy and drinking soft drinks and all, yeah, you can be on a low protein diet. Or if you're just eating a lot of very sweet fruit, you could be on a low protein diet. But if you're on a balanced diet, researchers have looked at this for years. I mean, just when I say balanced, it's a variety of foods, even plant foods. You can get all the protein you need. So, unless someone is unless you're specifically on a muscle building regimen and working with someone who's knowledgeable about that, I do not recommend that people try to eat extra or at certain times. Now, I do think a good exercise pattern, if you can do it, is to exercise early in the day and then have a good meal after that. So that's the routine that I follow, but I know some people, because their schedule, can't do that. Okay. So let's see here. Yeah, and so the same question, someone asking about the building muscle, as we talked about the basal metabolic rate, for example. So the first thing that's essential in building muscle is using the muscle. Okay, so it's basically you need to be stressing the muscle to build muscle, and so we're talking about regular committed physical activity. So that's going to be the foundation of a muscle building program. And we do recommend resistance training as well as aerobic activity. So that would be using weights or using bands, like the TheraBand, some of these things. So it's something where your muscles are working against resistance. That's also part of a good fitness program. So whether it's going to a health club that has weights or machines, whether you have some weights on your own that you're using or bands, so something where you're doing some resistance exercises as well. Okay. What about any other questions this evening? We're in the home stretch. Got about 8 minutes that I've dedicated for any other questions that might come in if you have them. Okay, I've got something saying I've got 3 new messages on one device, but I think they're messages that I've already seen. Let me just, okay, I think we've covered all of those. Good. Anything else on your list for tonight? Any other final questions? Okay. So what is the best way? Oh, okay. Are dark circles under the eyes a sign of allergies? They actually can be. They actually can be. Can also in some people be a sign of lack of sleep. Okay. So those are 2 of the more common reasons we'll see that. Is going on a juice fast good for you? Well, let me talk a little bit more about that. Do I ever put people on a juice fast? I do. And you say, what would the situations be? So remember, if we're looking kind of in broad strokes and we're talking about weight optimization, I'm generally not recommending juice. Now, if we're trying to get someone on a really high nutrient intake, especially if they have appetite issues or if they're underweight. If someone's underweight, I not uncommonly will prescribe juice for them. I'll tell them, have that juice 30 minutes before your meal time. And, if you can make the fresh juice, I mean, that's ideal. And that's a way of getting calories again with less satiety. So then when you sit down to eat a half an hour later, it's still pretty much the same meal time. You've just extended the meal time by 30 minutes. But when you sit down to eat, you're not likely to eat that many calories less. So in other words, if you just drank 200 calories of juice, you're probably not going to eat 200 calories less at the meal. You may eat 100 calories less, but it's a way of getting more calories in. Now, what about just a juice fast? If a person is trying to lose weight, I'm less likely to do that. If a person has diabetes, I'm very unlikely to do that because juice can really shoot your blood sugar up. So if you want juices that will not raise your blood sugar up, they're not going to taste very good. So those are those leaf, stem, and flower vegetables. I don't know if any of you've tried, broccoli, kale, celery juice, but most people won't really care for that. Okay, they'll want to put the carrot in there, or the beet, or the apple, and once you start putting those things in, you're getting a little, they're much more calorically rich. So could someone say, well, I want to count my calories and go on an 800 calorie juice fast for a week? Could I do that? Well, theoretically, you could do it. I mean, if you feel like, well, that's a strategy that's worked for you, it helps you drop some weight. But remember, we're interested in you doing things that help you long term. Now, if you said, well, I want to do this 1 week every month and I lose 5 pounds reliably, I'm going to do this every month and it'll drop my weight 5 pounds, even if it creeps up the other weeks. Well, if there's something that works in your routine that way, I mean, definitely that's fine for you to choose to do that. I'm just saying in general, juicing is not something that I typically use in people who are trying to lose weight. Okay. Anything else on your list this evening in our final couple minutes? Okay, usually that means everyone is voting to wind up right now. So let me remind you what's coming up. We'll be coming up next week with a video pre-recorded program. We've recorded it already. It's especially on behavior change. I'll introduce you to a very successful strategy I've used with a lot of patients and with groups for changing behaviors and sticking with them long term. So that'll be the focus next week. It'll be pre-recorded. So if you can't jump on right at 7 p.m., if you jump on at 7 p.m., you're able to interact. It's only on YouTube. It won't be on Zoom, but you'll be able to interact in the chat together with others who are watching at the same time. So that is one nice feature of that, what they call, I think they call it an instant premiere on YouTube. And then 2 weeks from tonight, which is April 1st, we're planning to have that graduation program. Whether we have certificates for you or not, I don't know. We definitely won't print them out for all of you, but we may make some kind of template available if I can find one, or if one of you helps me find one. And but we want to hear your stories. So if you can't join us April 1st, tell us your stories, send us something through, go to timelesshealinginsights.org, go to the contact us, and send me your story. Tell us what's happened. Let us know if we can include your name or if you don't want your name included. So that's also an important note. I will not include names unless you tell me it's okay. So we'll just leave them. We'll use your initials unless you have pseudo initials you want me to use, okay? And then last quick question, is it common for a gallbladder to flare up in losing weight? It can. Yes, gallbladder problems can flare up with weight loss, especially rapid weight loss. So that is a legitimate concern. Okay, that winds up tonight's program. Thank you all not only for joining us, thank you to the many of you that participated, the great questions, the things that you shared. And we'll look forward to being together in person. If you're in our Wednesday night support groups, I do plan to be with you for those the next 2 Wednesdays. Those will end on the 29th of March. And I look forward to being with you in person April 1st. And I look forward to seeing your comments in the YouTube feed, because we will release next week's program on YouTube at 7 p.m. next Saturday evening. Have a good night to each one of you. Continued success. You're all on a path to success because you continue on with the Fast Aid program. Don't forget that. Have a good week.